Hi, I'm Garrett with the Grit and Polish, and today I wanted to talk about curved hood vents. So I put this together for the Poplar Cottage kitchen remodel. If you've been following along, you might have seen a little preview of the process and this kind of curved looking hood that's going to go right over the range here. I wanted to show you how I put this together in case you wanted to try tackling this for your own project. It's not that hard. I used a combination of plywood and lath and then some setting compound to get the curved plaster look. This isn't actually a true plaster job. It just uses some pretty commonly available materials, and if you're at all even a little bit skilled at doing drywall mud or troweling or mudding, I think you can take this project on. I'm going to walk through all of the steps that I took to install this. Each hood vent is going to be a little bit unique. The location's going to be unique and the dimensions are going to be for your specific kitchen and application. So take this as kind of a general outline for how you could think about doing it, and then of course everything will be customized to your space. I used a simple 2x4 box to create a little bit of foundation for the rest of the framing for the hood vent and to secure the hood vent to the wall. Having an extra set of hands around is really handy, or if you fly solo like me, some bar clamps to hold the hood vent in place while you're getting it all attached and adjusted is really handy. The hood vent is actually attached to the framing through the inside of the box, so if in the future this ever needs to come out, we will have to just disconnect the ductwork from the attic space and then unscrew the hood vent from the framing, and it should slide down. Don't forget the electrical connection. Your hood vent will not work very well unless it has power. Marking out and cutting for the ventilation can happen either after you have the hood vent in place like I did, or you could do it beforehand. Just leave a little bit of fudge room so that when you get your final placement, you can get the pipe down onto the hood vent and secure it. I use aluminum foil tape, and this is to seal up all the seams in the ventilation and make it nice and tight. Once your ventilation's in place, you can add a little bit of framing support that will determine the overall shape and dimension of your final look for your hood vent. So now for the curve. This is probably what took me the most time in the project, was just to figure out how I was going to do this, and I used a cardboard template. This is the actual one that I used for these front pieces, and it really is simple. This is the framing member, this is cut out for the hood vent, and then this attaches up to the framing support near the ventilation. And then once I had my cardboard template, I just literally traced it onto a plywood piece and cut it out using a jigsaw. Before I attached the curved support to the framing, I made sure everything was level and square, and then used a few screws and blocks to get everything really secure. Once the framing was in place, it was time for the lath. This is just a 1/4 inch by 3 foot long piece of lath. It's really easy to cut. You can fasten it really quickly with some air staples. I used a narrow gauge crown stapler. You could use brads if you needed to, but this went up really easy and followed the contour of the curve to give a nice support for the plaster. So I debated what to do after I had the lath up. I knew the lath was going to give a nice support for the compound that I was using on top, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get any hairline cracks or fractures, and finally decided to just use mesh fiber seam tape. I recommend getting the 90-minute setting compound. You just mix it with water and then mud it on over whatever your application is. It sets up after a period of time, so it's actually hard to the touch and provides a really nice solid base for the plaster-like finish of the hood vent. The first layer really is just to set the tape, get the joints kind of covered over. It's not gonna look super pretty. I embedded a little bit of corner bead, outside corner bead along the bottom. It has a metal edge underneath that gives it some extra strength and creates a nice corner. So you could get some corner bead. You don't have to do that step if you want to try to form this yourself, but it makes it a little bit easier and stronger if you have that metal corner bead. And then where the actual hood vent is in contact with the walls, I went ahead and used some seam tape there, some drywall tape, and bedded that into the joint compound to create a nice solid seamless look with the hood vent. Getting to the final smooth curved surface is really a process of just applying layers of the setting compound until you get to the point where you have a pretty nice shape and it's pretty smooth. Between each layer of joint compound, I touched up with a little bit of sandpaper and scraped off any high spots. After the third layer of joint compound, I felt like the overall shape and structure of the hood vent was pretty dialed in. And I just wanted to add that little last bit of smoothing and topping mud that was easy to shape in sand to give it an extra smooth and really workable finish. Once the final coat of the light topping compound was all dry, I gave it a good sand. And this really is where you'll get your final finish, its look and texture. I was using 100 grit sandpaper, and you can actually see a little bit of that sandpaper line still in the texture after I've primed it. I think it kind of gives it a cool little bit of a plaster-like finish. So however you like that look to go, make sure you get either a really fine sandpaper if you want no texture, or you could even go with something a little bit heavier grit. And you could cross hatch the grain a little bit. In my case, I went all in one direction, so I have this little bit of vertical 100 grit grain that's bedded into the final topping compound. All of the tools and materials that I use for this project are available on the Grit and Polish. I put a link in the description, so if you're after any particular tool or want to know just what kind of joint compound I used, head over there. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe if you thought this video was helpful,